Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo is a book I'm sure you've heard all about, especially if you've been on BookTube for a little while, because it is well and truly hyped. It is very well talked about. It has great reviews, but I want to look today to see whether it is actually as good as people say or if it's just way overhyped. And while we're already here, I'll give you a bit of a review of the book as well. So first off, Leigh Bardugo is actually typically a YA author, although not this time. This book is definitely adult fantasy and it's set in the real world at Yale University. Now, straight up, you need to know that this book is hella dark and has some super heavy themes. Our main protagonist who we follow is a girl named Alex, and she has come from the worst place. She doesn't come from money. She's suffered drug abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all sorts of different problems, and it gets darker and darker as you get through this book. So trigger warning, this book is not for the faint of heart. There are some very heavy, dark, sick, twisted themes, no doubt about it. Now, having said all that, it's actually one of the biggest draw cards for me because it's as if Leigh Bardugo plucked Alex, our protagonist, out of the real world. She's such a relatable character who's gone through the absolute ringer, and for whatever reason, that really drew me in. I wanted to know how this girl has gotten to where she is from where she was, and how far will she progress as a person. And considering it was set in Yale, which is a real place, and I found out Leigh Bardugo actually went to Yale, that made it all the more interesting to me. What a fun, unique setting. And I think she absolutely nailed that element of the atmosphere of the book. Now, coming from the absolute low point in her life, she finds herself with an opportunity to join Yale University, but not in a traditional sense. She has to join a secret society that's almost like a cult that's involved in some very dark, twisted, weird magic. And that was really interesting and very well executed by Bardugo, no doubt. Now, the reason Alex finds herself in this position is because she has a very unique ability that someone has picked up on that almost nobody possesses, and it makes her very valuable, and they really want to recruit her. She becomes a high priority for that secret society because they have, or she has, the secret sauce that they need. Now, what I'll say is that it definitely has magical elements of this book, but I wouldn't say that there's a magic system per se. There's no doubt it's fantastical, but not in the sort of whimsical setting that you're thinking about, and definitely not a hard or soft structured magic system. It's more just a magical kind of world within a world we already know. Almost like unlocking the key to a totally new dark world that nobody really knows exists. Now, here is where my review definitely starts to take a turn, because while those things are fantastic, they were super interesting, really intriguing, dark, mystical, magical, ticks all the boxes, hooked me in, it didn't hold up throughout the whole book. Now, don't get me wrong, it still might really suit your style of reading, but for me, a couple of the main themes, the things that were really obvious, aren't really my style, and I don't think they were brilliantly executed. Now, before I do get into those themes, one of the things that really stood out to me was that the pacing of this book was a little bit all over the place, and I thought that even though it was a really exciting, thrilling style of book, I don't think it was executed in that way. There were a lot of boring parts. I found myself drifting off a little bit. There was a lot of filler for little bits of action, and don't get me wrong, the parts that were great and really well executed and had me hook, line, and sinker. I was totally involved in the story. Page after page, I was flying through, but I found that it was surrounded by quite a lot of slow, boring activity that probably didn't really need to be there. But that was only a minor issue. The more major issue were two big themes that I didn't love. And the first one was the connection between the living and the dead. And there was nothing wrong with this. I'm sure it was executed well. I'm sure lots of people enjoy it, but for me, it's not something that I typically enjoy, and this was no exception. And the second issue I had was the elements of time travel. Now, this did not take the forefront, but it's something that I don't usually enjoy in stories unless it's executed extremely well, and I don't think it was. And don't get me wrong, it didn't ruin the book, it didn't take away enormously from it, but it definitely didn't add to it in my opinion, and I just don't love that theme unless you absolutely nail it on the head, and I really just didn't think that happened. But one thing I will say is, even though I don't love time travel, I thought the parts where they time travel in this book coincidentally were also the best parts of the book, which is kind of ironic because I've just said I don't love time travel and I don't think they nailed it, but I think that the areas of this book where they did go back, that story actually went to a really fun place. I just didn't think that the time travel elements were the reason for that. They could have done that in many different ways, but Leigh Bardugo took this route. There was nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't personally for me. So to give you my overall thoughts of the book, in fact, before I do that, have a look on my bookshelves. One of these books over here I'm currently reading, and I know you don't know my bookshelf yet, but It's very obvious. One of these books is currently being read by me. See if you can figure out which one and comment down below. But to summarize this book, if you like dark, gritty, heavy themes, this was a really fun read, but I definitely do think it is overhyped. Sure, it's a good book, but it was not memorable for me. It's not something that I'll look back on. While the book was good, sure, and you will have fun reading it most likely, it's definitely way overhyped in my opinion. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know down below if you've read this book, what you thought of it. Let me know if you're planning on reading it. Hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. See ya!